1/2 point. Those crazy kids. Good Lord. I mean, there was a question even if there was going to be a 1/4 point. I saw it at a 1/4 point at the most. They cut a 1/2 point. The market went immediately right through the roof. Boom, up over 300. I mean, the market had been waiting and waiting to see what was going to happen from the Federal Reserve. The statements from Jerome Powell, there it is, lowering the overnight lending rate to 4 3/4 to 5 from the 5 1/4 to 5 1/2. I mean, it's going to be all sorts of conversation. What it does for the market, what it might do to mortgage rates, and of course, is this the Federal Reserve playing in an election, interfering in an election, trying to tip the scales in an election? Tony Katz today. Good to be with you. Dr. Matt Will joins us right now, economist at the University of Indianapolis. Dr. Matt Will on the X Twitter. You find him there. First things first, 1/2 point. The futures people last night, you were telling me 66% of them thought it was going to be a 1/2 point. Earlier today, it was at a 55-45 in favor of the 1/2 point. It's a 1/2 point. Your take?
Okay. Well, Tony, you always tell me that our audience that you have here is very smart and it's okay to push the limits. Well, I'm going to push the limits here. I want everybody to remember a simple formula. Profits divided by interest rates. That's it. Just remember that. Profits divided by interest rate. The stock market likes more profits and lower interest rates. And profits divided by lower interest rates means higher stock prices. That's what happened. The market is so happy that the interest rates got cut, because now the stock market went up, like you said. And it wasn't just 50 basis points. The news article released, the press release said they anticipate doing 50 more basis points by the end of the year. And this is what I want to talk about with you. They projected that they will not hit their target inflation rate for 2 years. For 2 more years, we will be living with higher inflation. The Federal Reserve Board has said to the world, we're going to give you lower interest rates because you want them, but forget about the inflation. You're going to be stuck with it for at least 2 more years. That's all right. The headline.
Let's take a step back. The target rate for inflation from the Federal Reserve has been 2%. And we have had what was that?
Under 2. Let's not focus on 2. It's 1 to 2%.
Okay. All right, given. I said 2%, 1 to 2. Jerome Powell, Federal Reserve Chairman, had repeatedly said that we are not going to make the mistakes of the past. We're going to keep these interest rates at a place that brings inflation in line. And you were the one who noted that about 6 months ago, he started changing his tune. And now, with a reduction of a 1/2 point, the statement as you're discussing it, that there's going to be another 1/2 point reduction in 2024. And yet we still won't get to an inflation target rate the Fed wants for another 2 years, seems to be Jerome Powell saying, hey, you guys can have what you want. I don't actually care. I still get vacation days. That sounds like a guy who's given up trying.
Yes, 100% yes. And guess who he's given up to? He's given up to Wall Street and the politicians. Wall Street loves this. I'm going to remind people of this formula. Just like we talk about cash and stuff for inflation, the stock market is profits divided by interest rates. Wall Street loves this because they got cheap rates. But know who hates it? Main Street. Main Street has had a 20% pay cut under the Harris administration for 3.5 years now. I calculated this morning, 20% inflation in 3.5 years. Tell me, how many people on Main Street like the 20% inflation? Has anybody got 20% in raises recently? So I'm telling you, giving up on inflation is hurting Main Street, but it's helping Wall Street, and Wall Street loves the cheap money.
Talking to Dr. Matt Will, economist at the University of Indianapolis. It's interesting. I have an actual side-by-side of how they use the words in July and how they use the words most recently in their statements. What's fascinating is when this rate cut first hit, The Dow jumped to plus 350. The Dow was up. Right now, as we're talking, it's moderated back down to up 103. The NASDAQ is up 108. Don't get me wrong, things fluctuate. There's still things at play and people doing their work. The question is, I expected to see excitement, absolute pandemonium. And what I'm seeing is, hooray! Okay, let's get back to work. Where's the madness? Where's the craziness? Where's prices going and the market going through the roof because of this?
By the way, you are so right, because the market reacted. It got its drug. Now, look at the yield curve at this very moment as we're speaking. Interest rates 3, 10, 5 years, 15 years, 30 years are up. Let me say that again. Interest rates are up for long term. What does that tell you? That the market thinks, oh, we're going to get inflation. They read the report. They say, look, we're not going to hit our target for at least 2 years. By the way, the projection when you read the report from the Fed is that we're going to get 2+% in 2 years. They're still not going to get below their target. We could be stuck with permanent inflation, and they've given up on it, and long-term rates are higher because they reflect inflation.
Well, one of the places that seems to reflect inflation is gold. Gold prices are now over 2,600, taking a gigantic jump, if you will, of over $20 just in the last little bit. You surprised by this move?
I'm surprised at the magnitude of it, and I'm surprised by the signal, because the signal they sent is, we're giving you 0.5%. That surprised me. But then to say, we're going to give you another 0.5% and we're going to give you 1% next year, this is what they said. And we're not going to hit our inflation target in the foreseeable future. They didn't even tell us when they'll hit their target. They have given up on inflation. I am surprised that Jerome Powell is that political. And you made a good observation there, Tony. Gold. Gold is where people go whenever there's inflation. And so the market says, uh-oh, inflation's not going away.
I think that you bring up something that we should dig into, and it's the idea of political. I'm surprised Jerome Powell is that political. We're going to see a full percent in 24, a full percent in 25, but no guarantee that we'll have inflation down even in 2 years. You're utilizing the terminology given up. I certainly made the joke about giving up. The question before us is why? Why in the world is Jerome Powell going down this road when he has been so outrageously strong, even in dealing with progressive spending like the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure, this, that, and the other?
I can't read his mind, but if I were in his shoes and I'm sitting there and I've been doing everything I possibly can, and the federal government refuses to cut spending, and he says it time and again, fiscal responsibility, and they refuse to be fiscally responsible, I think he may be just throwing his hands up and saying, okay, here you go. Here's your rates. I'm going to the beach.
The rest of the Fed isn't. Wait a second. This isn't a vacuum. The rest of the Fed, the other Fed presidents, they're not saying like, well, just don't worry about it. Screw it. Blanket, just do whatever. They're not making that argument.
Well, no. Only one person is actually. Michelle Bowman was the only person who voted against this. So it was not a unanimous decision. There was one dissenter who said, no, we need to look at inflation. So it's not uniform, but they tend to come together. Having a dissenter like that is kind of a surprise, quite honestly.
Talking to Dr. Matt Will, economist at the University of Indianapolis. Dow is right now up 85. It was actually in the negative just about 4 minutes ago, back up in the green. NASDAQ up 72. And it's going to fluctuate. I'm just giving you the right now where we're at. And that brings us to, you're a guy who's in the market. Dr. Will, you're a man who's done some investing for yourself and for some other people. What does this move tell you right now?
Okay, you're asking me to put on my investor hat and take off my Main Street hat.
Yes.
Okay. I can tell. I love it.
Hat.
I love it. I love the cheap money. I can do leverage investing now. I can borrow money and put it in the market. I can put it in money that's going to float up, not because the economy is doing better. Now, pardon the pejorative, but I don't give a crap about the inflation because I'm just in the market making my money. And that's what Wall Street's about. Wall Street investors just want cheap money so that they can make dollars now. They don't care about the inflation that the consumer has to deal with. So, yeah, as an investor, I love it. I can't say enough good things about the rate cut.
So the rate cut has people borrowing at 4.75 or 5. Really, it's going to be a little bit more than that because that's the rate in between the banks, and feeling they can get a better return than that. So this is all just gravy for them. This is what we should all be doing.
I am not going to give advice. I do not think the average person should be doing leveraged investing. That is a sophisticated, risky item. I think the average investor should put their money in an index fund and let it go. Here's the sad part. Long term, inflation is going to kill your index fund.
Yeah, and the inflation is where they want it to be, in that 1 to 2% range. But in order to get it there, they have to move it there. Thus, the question, if you're Jerome Powell and trying to make sense of this and saying, here we are with this half-point rate cut, we're going to have another half point in 2024, we're going to have another percent in 2025, How then do you make the argument about where inflation goes? What is it that you tell people regarding the level of cash being put into the system? How do you actually think you obtain that 1 to 2% inflation year by year?
Okay, I'm going to say this very clear, and people won't like this. He doesn't care. They say in their announcement they've given up. They do not forecast ever getting into their 1 to 2% range anytime in the next 2 years. They have no anticipation. I am telling you, Jerome Powell has given up, and he's saying, look, we've done everything we can. You've got to get your fiscal house in order. Stop your spending, or you're just going to live with inflation, people. I'm telling you, that's what he is saying, because he knows this will cause inflation. But he can't stop it. Harris and Biden are creating the inflation. The Republicans are cooperating, and he's saying, look, I'm not going to fight all of you.
Right. Democrats spend, Republicans spend slower is how the expression goes. Here's a thought. How much of this is a hedge regarding the election? Not that he's being political to put the thumb on the scale for Kamala Harris, but rather expecting the idea of having to deal with Trump, wanting to keep the job, and knowing the minute Trump takes office, he's going to be all about the rates are too high.
You're asking me, you asked me to predict the future, and I'm not able to. You're asking me to read the mind of Jerome Powell, and I'm not able to. I don't know what's going on in the guy's head, other than if I were in his shoes, I would throw up my hands and say, I'm tired of dealing with all of you. Here's your cheap money. Well,
the cheap money is absolutely here. Dr. Matt Will, economist, University of Indianapolis. I appreciate taking the time to be with us. A half-point cut from the Fed, and another one is coming, according to the statement. I'm Tony Katz. This is Tony Katz Today.